So this is my presentation on traumatic brain injury. I just wanted to note that the little star on the slides indicates that I put additional info for possible extra credit. So the definition of traumatic brain injury is a disruption in the normal function of the brain that can be caused by a bump, blow, or jolt to the head or penetrating head injury. So the first part of the brain that I focused on is the cerebellum. The function is that it receives information from the sensory systems, the spinal cord, and other parts of the brain, and then regulates motor movements. It also coordinates voluntary movements such as posture, balance, coordination, and speech. And then I listed the signs of injury to the cerebellum, which include loss of coordination of motor movement, inability to judge distance and when to stop, inability to perform rapid alternating movements and movement tremors, slurred speech, and abnormal eye movements. For all of these, there's tons of signs and symptoms, but I just narrowed it down to what I thought was most important. The next part of the brain is the frontal lobe, and its function is that it is the emotional control center. It's involved in motor function, problem solving, spontaneity, memory, language, initiation, judgment, impulse control, and social and sexual behavior. Some signs of injury to the frontal lobe include sudden changes in behavior, impaired moral judgment, memory loss or dementia, reduced motor skills and spatial reasoning, and impaired language skills. So the occipital lobe function is more straightforward. It's responsible for processing visual information from the eyes, and then signs of injury to it would be subtle changes in visual perception systems such as visual field defects and scotomas, and also visual hallucinations and illusions. And then this is just a diagram on the left of where the occipital lobe is located. The parietal lobe, it has two regions. One region is involved with sensation and perception, and the other is concerned with integrating sensory input, primarily with the visual system. Signs of injury to the parietal lobe, there was a bunch, so this actually has two slides. But let's start with abnormalities in body image and spatial relations. And then there's a specific syndrome that goes along with damage to the parietal lobe, which is Gerstmann syndrome. And characteristics of that are right-left confusion, difficulty with writing and mathematics, disorders with language, and inability to perceive objects normally. This is some more signs of damage to the parietal lobe, and those are neglecting part of the body or space, difficulty in making things, denial of deficits, and another specific syndrome is balance syndrome, which is a syndrome associated with visual attention and motor skills. And then this is another diagram of where the parietal lobe is located, right in the middle on the top. So here's a diagram of the brainstem on the right, and its function is that it controls the flow of messages between the brain and the rest of the body, and it also controls basic functions such as breathing, swallowing, heart rate, blood pressure, and consciousness. Needless to say, injury to the brainstem is extremely serious. It seemed to be some of the most detrimental symptoms, and those include heartbeat and breathing can cease, causing death, difficulty breathing or swallowing, and sleep apnea. The temporal lobe has a lot of information, but its function is that it is involved in primary organization of sensory input. It's also highly associated with memory skills and recognition of words and speech. There were 8 primary signs of injury to the temporal lobe. So the first one is disturbance of auditory sensation and perception. And then we have the disturbance of selective attention of auditory and visual input, disorders of visual perception, impaired organization and categorization of verbal material, disturbance of language comprehension, impaired long-term memory, altered personality and affective behavior, as well as altered sexual behavior. So some accommodations for students with traumatic brain injury. Well, first and foremost, you need to know the student and know the history of their injury, how it happened, when it happened, and what their specific plan for recovery is. But some other accommodations that are just more general would be keep distractions to a minimum. Um, For example, you could have the student sit in a more isolated area in the classroom or give them like a folder to block out things around them so that they can focus their attention on what they're working on. Use peer note takers so that they can just do their best to focus in the moment instead of worrying about writing everything down. Um, Something that goes along with that is also allowing them to use a tape recorder so that they can go back and listen to the lesson later. Um, Also provide assignments in writing, work in small groups, allow the student to have frequent breaks so that they don't strain their brain too much. Allow additional time for assignments to alleviate kind of the stress and anxiety factor. Um, Display the classroom schedule so that they have an idea of what's going on throughout the week or month or however you choose to display it. Provide repetition, and like I said, just know your student. This is just a diagram of all the parts of the brain that I just went over. And then this is just a video on causes and prevention strategies for traumatic brain injury, specifically for children. It's only a 2-minute video, and I thought it was very informational and helpful.